As the gatekeepers of a resource that has fueled industrialization and has a steady high level of worldwide demand, the world's top oil-producing nations have a tremendous impact on the global stage. Moreover, 95 million barrels per day, BPD, were produced in 2019, according to the BP Statistical Review of World Energy 2020, which is about the same amount as in 2018 and a 17% rise from 10 years ago. There are an estimated 1.73 trillion barrels of proven worldwide oil reserves, and 3 strong countries produce the majority of this fuel, which is used for heating, industry, transportation, and the creation of plastics and chemicals. Despite increasing international support for measures to move away from oil as an energy source in response to worries about climate change, it continues to make up a sizable portion of the global fuel supply for the time being. Many of the nations on this list are part of OPEC, a group of oil-exporting nations that, since its founding in 1960, has maintained strict control over world oil output in order to stabilize oil prices and guarantee stable revenue for its members. Based on output figures from 2019, NS Energy highlights the top 10 oil-producing nations in the world. Hello everyone, this is AWZ. Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy. The United States. 18,875,000 barrels per day are produced. The United States is ranked first among these top 10 oil-producing nations. To achieve 18,875,000 BPD last year, its output climbed by 266,000 BPD from the 2020 objective. Due to its production fluctuating along with market prices, the U.S. has been called a swing producer. Texas is the nation's top oil-producing state, with output approximately 4 times more than that of New Mexico, which is in second place. The U.S. consumes a lot of oil in addition to being a large producer of it. The U.S. consumed 7.22 billion barrels of petroleum products in total last year, or 19.78 million BPD on average. Arab states. 10,835,000 barrels per day produced. In 2021, Saudi Arabia produced 10,835,000 BPD of oil. The nation is the greatest exporter of petroleum and holds 17% of the world's proven petroleum reserves. Its oil and gas industry is responsible for around 85% of its export revenue and about 50% of its gross domestic product. As already established, Saudi Arabia was crucial to OPEC's decision to cut oil production in 2020. To comply with the terms of an agreement made with other OPEC members and partners, the nation made the decision to cut output by 3.3 million BPD. As a result of the country's deteriorating ties with the U.S. in 2022, the Arab Kingdom doesn't appear willing to raise output in an effort to lower growing gasoline prices. Russia. 10,778,000 barrels per day in production. Russian oil output had been increasing for a number of years prior to the production limits in 2020. It reached 10,778,000 BPD last year. The Urals-Volga region, which stretches into the Caspian Sea, and West Siberia, which is situated between the Ural Mountains and the Central Siberian Plateau, are where the majority of Russia's reserves are found. Russia produces 10% of the world's oil and ranks third in terms of production. According to a CNN story, the countries of Canada, the US, the UK, and Australia have prohibited the purchase of Russian oil, which accounts for roughly 13% of Russia's exports because of its involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. The International Energy Agency, IEA, issued a warning in March 2022 that Russia would be compelled to reduce its crude oil production by 30%, which would cause a catastrophic global oil supply crisis. The IEA declared that the consequences of a potential loss of Russian oil shipments to global markets cannot be underestimated. Canada. 5,558,000 barrels are produced each day. Canada is the next nation on this list of the top 10 oil-producing nations. From 2020's output levels of 5,235,000 barrels per day, the nation's yearly oil production increased to 5,558,000 barrels per day in 2021. The majority of Canada's proved oil reserves are found in Alberta, and the oil sands make up 97% of those reserves, according to the provincial government. The vast bulk of Canada's total energy exports are headed to the U.S. However, due to political and economic factors, Canada is working to diversify its trading partners, particularly by strengthening connections with developing Asian economies. Pipelines have become the subject of a heated national discussion in Canada. In order to guarantee that Canadian crude reaches market ports, the federal government paid 4.5 billion Canadian dollars for the Kinder Morgan NYSE KMI Trans Mountain Pipeline in 2018. At the time, it was projected that an expansion would cost a further 7.4 billion Canadian dollars and that the government would then resell the project to the private sector. The project's cost estimate was revised in February 2020, bringing it from 7.4 billion Canadian dollars to 12.6 billion Canadian dollars. In February 2022, it was revised once more, nearly tripling to 21.4 billion Canadian dollars. China's daily production is 4,993,000 barrels. In 2021, China produced 4,993,000 barrels of oil per day on a yearly basis. The country is the second biggest oil consumer in the world, and in 2014 it became the largest net importer of oil. China has the highest overall energy consumption in the world because of its large population and quickly expanding economy. In actuality, the Asian nation consumes the most oil, with 55% of its imports coming from Opec nations. According to Reuters, China's crude oil refineries have been reducing production in the first few months of 2022 as a result of COVID-19 lockdowns, since the virus continues to pose a threat to the government's zero-COVID policy. Production in Iraq is 4,149,000 barrels per day. Despite boosting its output, Iraq lost ground to Saudi Arabia to become the sixth largest oil producer in 2017. The country was able to reclaim the sixth slot in 2018 because to output. The country in the Middle East has had a sharp decline in its oil production in recent years, going from 4,788,000 barrels per day in 2019 to 4,149,000 barrels per day in 2021. With 145 billion barrels, it has the fifth largest proven oil reserves in the world, accounting for 8.4% of total reserves. Production in the United Arab Emirates is 3,786,000 barrels per day. The United Arab Emirates is a member of OPEC and has consistently been one of the top 10 oil-producing nations in the world. Production in 2021 increased little year over year, with daily oil output increasing to 3,786,000 barrels. With 98 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the nation ranks 7th in the world, with the majority of those reserves being in Abu Dhabi. 5.6% of the total reserves in the world are held by the United Arab Emirates. Brazil's daily production is 3,689,000 barrels. From 3,769,000 barrels per day in 2020 to 3,689,000 barrels per day in 2021, Brazil's oil production marginally decreased. Brazil's total primary energy consumption has nearly doubled over the previous 10 years, according to the EIA, as a result of its consistent economic expansion. Oil and other liquid fuels account for the greatest portion of Brazil's overall energy consumption, followed by hydroelectricity and natural gas. According to a Reuters article from April 2022, Brazil and the U.S. are negotiating to raise oil production in response to Russia's conflict in Ukraine. Iran's daily production is 3,458,000 barrels. Iran produced 3,458,000 barrels per day of oil in 2021 compared to 2,990,000 barrels per day in 2020, a sharp rise. Iran has the second largest proven natural gas reserves and the third largest proven oil reserves in the world, according to the EIA. Iran has large oil reserves, but output has significantly decreased recently. In 2017, it produced 4,779,000 barrels per day. Iran's energy production industry has been hampered by U.S. sanctions and regional conflicts. China has urged the U.S. to lift its sanctions against Iran in light of the recent signing of a 25-year trade and security agreement. Production in Kuwait is 2,717,000 barrels per day. Kuwait is the last nation on this list of the top 10 oil-producing nations, and its output fell in 2021 for the third time since 2018. Production peaked in 2016 at 3,072,000 barrels per day but fell to 3,025,000 in 2017. While the nation's production increased somewhat in 2018 to 3,059,000 barrels per day, it decreased once again in 2019 to 3,017,000 barrels per day. The oil and gas industry in Kuwait contributes over 60% of the nation's GDP and an even bigger share, almost 95% of its export earnings. This is all for today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel. Stay tuned with AWZ.